Good evening, everyone. I appreciate you braving a severe winter storm warning to come out and hear about AI from these awesome people. In all seriousness, I appreciate you coming out to our February Kansas City AI Club meetup. My name is Chris Kovac. I am one of the co-founders of the AI Club. Really, we are an informal professional organization made up of a bunch of volunteers to bring together the AI community. So we have meetups, both live and virtual. We're going to have additional training programs and all kinds of fun stuff. So if you're interested in learning more about us and upcoming events, check out kansascity.ai. And you can also check out our LinkedIn page, which we have over 2,500 followers. That's the more updated information as well. So a couple of housekeeping things. If you didn't notice up front, we have snacks and water. The restrooms are actually behind these double glass doors over here. So use the door on the right, and it is right to your right. And so I have a few questions. How many of you first time at an AI Club event? Wow, awesome. How many of you have been to at least 2 or 3 events? That's great. I know that we have a lot of students here, so who's a student? Awesome. Well, I appreciate you joining us, and we're going to have a fun night. So, you know, as I drop my phone, one of the things that I get to do as part of my profession is play around with AI tools. And so, has anyone played around with AI music? Has anyone created your own song or anything like that? Awesome. Did it turn out well? Like, what was your take on it? So here, we actually have... This is our AI hype song. So this was made by Suno, S-U-N-O. It's an app on LinkedIn. It's an app on iPhone, and you can actually, I think it's $10, you can make 500 songs. And so that was something that I actually made that song in roughly 15 or 20 seconds. So I think as part of the AI Club, one of the best assets that we have is knowledge transfer and learning from each other. Every time we have an event, I'm always learning like so many different things. I'm so excited to go back and try, and to me, that's really cool. What's even more cool is Keystone Innovation District. This is the CoLAB. Who is the first time here? Awesome. I will not do it justice by speaking to the Keystone Innovation District here. They're doing great, great work. They have, what you call it, an incubator, accelerator? Accelerator. They support the community. They are just getting started. So I encourage you to look up Keystone Innovation District and learn about them. We are very appreciative that they're able to host. It's very hard to find a venue that we can fit these many people in. So thank you to Keystone, to Joe, to Kevin, to Brad, and everyone else. We are also a proud supporter of WeCode KC. Are you familiar with WeCode KC? Yeah. If you're not, WeCode KC, awesome. They provide services to underserved communities, and they do great things with kids. They're going to be the up-and-coming CEOs and CTOs. They're doing great work. If you're interested, check out WeCode KC. We do have some upcoming events. We're trying to switch up formats, so we're going to have virtual events as well as meetups and social events and so on. So the next one is February 21st, which is at noon. It is the Secrets to AI workshop, which I will be hosting. The idea there is we want to give back. It's only $10. We will donate 100% of that to WeCode KC. The idea is we want to share some of the secrets that we've attained over the last couple of years, and so that's kind of one way to give back. We're super excited. Our March meetup is March 4th at the Zuma Credit Union. It is going to be AI's impact on social and community issues. Joe's actually going to be one of our panelists. Again, the Zuma Credit Union, super awesome. And then finally, March 18th, we're going to be at Johnson County Community College in their ballroom, the Rainier Center, and we're going to have a panel discussion on AI, talent, and workforce. How are AI, how is it changing the way that we're working? What does that mean for careers in the future, and so on? Again, you can go to kansascity.ai to check that out. Also want to thank our sponsors, MashMetrics, NLP, Kovac AI, Duda.com, and SCM Rush. Again, we're all volunteers, and we appreciate our sponsors to help make this happen. So, without further ado, I want to introduce our panelists. So the way that this is going to work is this is going to be a moderated panel discussion. I'll kind of ask the questions, and we're just going to have a dialogue. We will have plenty of time at the end for questions. We want to make this interactive. Feel free, I guess, to jump in if you have a pressing question instead of waiting till the end. So let's see here, from right to left, we're going to go with Zach Gardner, and we have Chad Stewart, Thomas Bosilevac, and Lyndsay Noble. So what we're going to do is we're going to have the panelists spend a minute or two to introduce themselves, talk about some of the things that they're working on, and then we'll dive into more questions. So, Zach?
Hello, everyone. Thank you very much for coming out today. If you see my car, it has a dozen eggs in the back of it. Please do not steal my car. I'm more worried about that than my laptop. I'm the chief architect at Keyhole Software. We have been building software for banks and entertainment institutions, hospitals, kind of everything that you can possibly think. I haven't put anything into outer space yet. That's kind of one of my goals. And as the chief architect, I have to do a lot. I have to learn about things that are up and coming, to figure out what are the things that our clients are going to be asking about in 2 years, figure it out now, so when they're asking about it, it's like, yeah. So we got into AI, I would say about like 4 or 5 years ago, somewhere around that point. Everything from LLMs to very orthodox machine learning models, your regressions, your classifications, just kind of everything in between. Super productive tool, allows us to be more efficient with our time, and very, very bullish. I don't see it replacing us anytime soon.
Thanks, Zach. So, Chad Stewart, I am a data product manager. So how I got here was starting off as a data analyst, data engineer, working on software integrations using machine learning models, financial algorithms, different types of financials, like data platforms, where I grew into like a product owner, supporting different data engineers, where a lot of the focus was implementing like business analytic tools such as Tableau, Alltrex, other things that really like help workflows, where we're now, I think, so my background is really just in the data space, right? So right now, my focus has been driving data strategies, implementing different focuses around those strategies. Sorry. This is a little harder than I thought. It's been a while. I talk in front of people all the time, but now it's different. So really, in the AI world, it's all, my focus is implementing on a large scale and just getting things organized to really help the,
No one said our job was easy.
Yeah, man.
It's always hard to talk about yourself,
It's
right?
wild. It's different. So, yeah, I mean, long story short, my focus has been building business analytics and driving data pipelines early on. Now I manage data strategies and helping execute new features across data platforms, and looking forward to kind of just diving into this AI business analytic conversation. Yeah, that was harder than I thought, but let's rock and roll.
Just like data, buddy, just like data. So my name's Thomas Bosilevac. I'm the founder of MashMetrics, or at least I've been that for the last 9 years. Prior to that, I managed different data teams at Caterpillar, Microsoft, and then a couple data vendors. Before that, can I say 30 years ago, I worked with this guy in the digital marketing space. So my expertise has primarily been marketing, customer, and product data. Luckily, I don't have to deal with a lot of the finance information that you do. So.
Hi, am I close enough? There. I'm a classically trained statistician, so I was in the data space before cool words like data science and machine learning were even words. About the time those words got coined, I moved into leadership and started managing data science and machine learning teams. 7-8 months ago, July last year, I made the move to academics. So after a 20-year industry career, I decided to work for a university training the next generation. And by next generation, I don't just mean analysts and technology. Rockhurst has this cool approach that all business leaders need to be technology leaders and all technology leaders need to be business leaders. So I get to train MBAs as well as analytics folks. The world of AI is the same world that we've been in for a long time. It's just a little bit more user-friendly today than it was 10 years ago. And so people are talking about really cool stuff, but the problems that we run into, the needs that we have in order to implement AI, in order to use AI effectively in our businesses are the same problems we've had for 20 years. And it's my job to make sure people are trained to attack those problems.
I love that. All right, so I'm going to try. Can you guys hear me in the back? Let's try to say excellent. All right, so in your current role, professionally, how does AI transform your day-to-day, your day-to-day workflow? And or, like, what are you interested in? Because I think, a lot of us want to do AI things, but we're not quite there yet. But we're starting to plant seeds and kind of think about, well, it would be interesting to maybe do A, B, and C. So, Zach, if you want to start, how are you using AI just in your day-to-day activities?
We used to get, it goes in cycles. Probably about 9-10 years ago, everyone was like, microservices, got to be microservices. About 5 years, people are still asking. About 5 years ago, it was like, oh, we got to be on mobile. We got to have a mobile app. And it's like, you don't need a mobile app. And now everyone is like, all right, I need AI. And it's like, all right, you got 3 customers. Like, let's say you're a business that supplies, salt to people. And you want to predict when your customers are going to do another order. Well, it's like, you got 3 customers. Like, you don't need AI to tell you that. Like, you ask them. If you have 3,000 customers, if you have 30,000 customers, that becomes a totally different proposition. So from a day-to-day, a lot of it is just like level setting with people, honestly, about like, what are some realistic expectations? Like, you're not gonna train your own version of DeepSeek unless you have a data science team. Like, this is not there. But could you use some of these models? Could you have your own internal version of some of these tools so that your company's intellectual property doesn't get exfiltrated by some well-meaning employees wanting to do some analytics on it? It happened to Samsung back in about this time in 2023. It could probably happen to you. So I would say just from a non-functional, just purely, I may be in technology, but honestly, like, I get paid to talk to people. Like, the communication is honestly what I do most of the day. A lot of it's just trying to bring people back down to earth and figure out like how they can use these tools effectively, no matter what industry they're in.
I could probably use AI to help with my introduction, but really, from a day-to-day perspective, it really comes down to like saving time, right? And where I manage these large initiatives, time is money. So implementing workflows across different tools, Atlassian, where managing task management to all the way down to our engineers where they're using AI to improve code base or even just get things faster out the door, right? So I think with using the automation and simplifying repetitive tasks is going to be one of your key things that I think from what I found on a large scale will see benefits quickly, and those easy wins are always going to be something that you can take away and scale at a later date.
So from a client perspective or a client services perspective, you have a lot of communication. You've got a lot of, making sure the client knows step by step where all the projects are. That would take project managers quite a bit of time, and we've been able to use, systems like Kovac, things like that to automate a lot of that, or at least save them at 80% of the time is kind of like my benchmark. So from that perspective, it saved us a heck of a lot of time and able to be more forthcoming to or not forthcoming, but more communicative to our clients and let them know exactly where everything is at every stage. The rest is exploratory, because in the analysis we were talking earlier, it's not very good at analysis. So where is it good at? And trying to find those different areas of opportunity. That's where we spend a lot of time.
In the academic space, there's about 27 different directions I can go with this. One, I moved into academics 6 months ago and didn't know what the heck I was doing, so I asked tools to tell me stuff. right? It's the most bestest search engine on the planet. Summarize everything about everything. But also on the academic side, it's my job, again, to make sure people have the tools they need. And how do we take a degree program and evolve it to make sure that graduates have the skill set that they need to go into business, to go into the workforce. And many of them think that training their own LLM is the skill set that they need. And for some people, that is the skill set that they need. But for most humans, it's how to prompt engineer. It's how to evaluate the security of a tool. It's how to know what a good answer looks like. It's how to double check. Well, the computer, the engine told me this thing. Can I trust it? And teaching those skills, is that an analytics skill set? Is that a business skill set? Is that a everybody skill set? Those are the kinds of things that I have to think about every day. And then, guess what? Somebody has to build those classes. So I have to learn everything so that I can teach somebody else.
Is there one particular thing that you're learning right now that's especially interesting?
The thought process, I haven't seen how it works yet, the thought process of interjecting data into a chat GPT type tool and asking it questions. That's one thing.
Interactive
analysis of data. All the search engines, the GPTs themselves, tell you that they can do this. But I haven't seen it work yet. I haven't seen it work smart yet. So, yeah. So that's managing the hype. Because what the commercials say, what the tools tell you they can do, can they? Can they really? And that's the same hype we had with machine learning back in the day, right? It can solve the world's problems and we're going to solve world hunger and world peace. And no, we haven't yet. Let's get on it real quick, right?
I love the hype. You remember Rabbit R1? Did anyone buy one of those like me? It was hyped up to do everything. It would build your PowerPoint presentations. It would talk to you. It would order food. In fact, it does nothing. So I think that's part, we're always trying to balance the hype with the reality.
So, Chris, do you mind if I expand upon her statement? So, our job is to perform analysis on marketing, customer, and product data. And we're pretty good at it. And so we wanted to see, how much will AI help us? Can we use it in the same token as we do to summarize meetings or to summarize, complex data solutions? And the problem is there's so much context, whether it be what campaigns were we running this month? What campaigns were other competitors running last month? Why is our website different than another website? That there's so much contextual knowledge that is needed in order to analyze at least those data sets that we spend more time saying it's wrong than we did, okay, this is something valuable to move forward to. So it's, application is definitely something to look into.
I think many of us have been practicing AI for a while, even, in our corporate roles or company roles or individually. What would you say, what advice would you give to companies just dipping their toe in the AI pool? Like where do you get started? Like, how would you tell the executives, where to start? What advice would you give to them?
I'll just start from my perspective. One is why? Why do you want to use AI? I'm not going to tell them anything. I'm going to ask them questions. Because so many organizations, the exact same thing we did with machine learning and data science. We've got to have a machine learning solution. We've got to automate the heck out of this. Why? If you have a real good business reason for doing that, then we start to explore what's possible. But if this is not part of your corporate strategy, if this is not part of your value prop to your customers, think really hard about investing in this space.
But it can help optimize my email.
And it sure can.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to reiterate a lot of that, but just starting simple, right? Understanding just the business problem that you're trying to solve, right? Figure out a use case, going back to what I stated earlier. What are those repetitive tasks that you can eliminate? Start there, understand that. I think you said experiment and implement the changes, test fast, learn fast, but adapt to everything what you're learning, right? So another thing is continuous learning. AI is adapting faster than we can even keep up with, right? So upskilling is always going to be needed. that will help with just making sure you're staying on top of things. What else?
Chad, I got a quick follow-up. Is AI innovation coming top-down from executives or bottom-up from people being innovative from that direction? Or is it a mix of both? I'm curious from a larger organization perspective.
It's definitely coming from both directions, right? I think from the engineer level, they are wanting to use it more to help with their day-to-day activities. You have different parts of operations that they're trying to, again, cut time on, repetitive tasks. But even top down, you have the executives looking for what decisions to make, right? Like a lot of, in the past, you have historical, you're always looking in the past, right? Now with the AI, we're changing that type of data structure and looking at a more predictive way. So it is in both top down and bottom up. So it just depends on where you're at in the company as well, right?
Quick question?
Yeah, I mean, you guys kind of opened up the door. I work for a company, this may sound familiar. I don't know what our IS department is doing. And they keep going down this path of all these massively huge projects where you can see what it can do. And so like talking to them about making a more agile or modular approach to development, they just don't seem to want to do it at all. I mean, even testing. So like, have you guys run into that? And like, when you start to have that kind of conversation, because it's safety, it's training, it's learning.
Absolutely. Yeah, scaling AI in large corporate setting is very, very challenging. I mean, you have so many different regulations you have to follow.
Yeah.
We were having a conversation earlier, just making sure that whatever information is being put in that information is not sensitive or data that needs to be protected. There's a lot of concerns, risk management, that comes in play. So having it at a smaller scale, piloting it is the starting point. For it to go horizontal or vertical, it just takes time until going back to the whole trust, right? Do they actually trust those models to be utilized? Again, this is a difference between AI and Gen AI, right? So Gen AI and those platforms, those are for productivity, but internal AI tools, they're using things just to help implement that. That's also, again, something that they have to trust before they scale that.
Zach, can you build AI in an agile environment? What's your take on that?
If you're going to do something like that, you do have to have a top-down agreement that this is what you're actually going to do. Like there's, if you build it, they will come. I'm just not a fan of that. How many projects have been, we'll be like, oh, we'll do that in phase 2. And, in phase 2, like everyone's had a version 2. It never happens. So from the very top, there has to be an understanding of like, this is what we're going to do. And if you don't have that, then everything else crumbles. Probably the other best advice I would say is, a lot of executives will be like, oh, people aren't actually using these tools. Like we have a propensity as human beings to love the status quo. Like we don't like change. One of the best ways to convince people that this actually is happening is have them in the IS department look at the firewall logs of how many times people are going to chatgpt.com per month. Like we challenged our leadership at one of my clients on this. They're like, no one is using this. And then they came back a month later and they were like, they're using it. But if you're gonna do that, then you have to think through like, oh, okay, well, if I block it, what are people gonna use instead? Do you wanna offer them a route to actually use these tools safely and effectively? So you always have to have an AI champion from the very top that you become buddy with, and you kind of help influence that. But everyone is different. Every person, every company is different. Even in the same sector, even within the same company, I've seen different teams act completely differently. And if you want some advice, or if you need a beer or something to commiserate about it, my card's right here. If you need it. There was a question. Sorry.
Yeah, I wonder, having kind of left an organization fairly recently, and thinking about how things were going at that point, whether or not you've seen that companies that have AI owned by the IT department are more or less successful than when they put it in the hands of somebody whose job isn't also keeping the email server running or all those other kinds of things.
If I understood you right, is it better to have an interdisciplinary or sort of a multi-tenant ownership of an AI system versus it being the function of some team that manages Microsoft Outlook?
Well, that sounds like even more meetings than less meetings. I'm talking about like a dedicated group that says,
Yes.
this is the group that's handling all of the AI for what's going to change. The people that make sure that the computer still turns on, they're still turning the computer on and off.
Yeah, kind of like what I think Chris, you might have been the one that alluded to it. It was someone to my left, which there's a few people I can think of. In order for an AI implementation to be effective, you have to have something called an AI Center of Excellence, where it's an interdisciplinary, collaborative environment where you have people from legal, you have people from finance, you have people from technology, you have people from security, you have people from enterprise architecture. And they have to be the champions of the AI within the company, but they can't be the gatekeepers of it. They're the ones that are there that are keeping up with the changes in regulations or, in financial services. Like, there's a lot of ways you can cut yourself and, find yourself in court. Nobody wants to be deposed unless they're crazy. Like me, I want to do it one day. But you have to have a group of people that are looking out for the company's best interests, that are accelerating what the company is actually doing. That has been like the most effective model I think I've ever seen.
And if I can add, actually going back to the previous question, somebody's got to be measuring success. How are we going to define when something is complete that we can measure how well it worked? When you're talking about a big behemoth project, I think back to like data governance, for example, right? That goes on, it never ends. How do you measure success? Executives, leaders, they want to know, why am I spending money on this? And if it's a 5-year project and nobody's seen revenue in 5 years on this project or cost savings on this project, it dies. And it never goes anywhere, and we end up with what, the Gardner hype cycle, the trial of whoever, whatchamacallit. But to the same extent, that multidisciplinary committee, somebody on that committee's got to be responsible for measuring success.
We have a COE. The issue is the executives don't believe that we're kind of trying to attack from a cost savings perspective, because some of the projects we're doing reminded me of shit we did 20 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God. And, we're saying, hey, look, these 6 projects, if we went in this direction, would save us $6 million. And you just don't even believe it. So they're not even putting trust in the COE.
I was going to ask, what are some really good indicators you've seen where you could actually measure success? Like, what are some actual measurements you see are successful? Maybe you could speak a little bit to like what other maybe some key indicators really are kind of making it harder to measure.
Love it, KPIs, and I think we are going to have different perspectives on that. So, what KPIs are you looking at?
And what ones are easier to achieve and measure as opposed to harder?
I say the easy one is time savings, right? That's like low-hanging fruit. How much time did this used to take us? And now, applying AI or generative AI, how much time are we saving? And that's applied in many different aspects of what we do. Again, we charge per hour, so yeah, part of me is like, okay, does it matter if we do it faster, but we could do much better work in that time period. So we had a massive data categorization project, and we estimated this was probably going to take about a month and a half in order to resolve and go through all kinds of different filters and how do we group the data, et cetera, et cetera. Well, through a bit of prompt engineering, we got it pretty darn close in like a week and a half. And then we had to, boy, you're right, it really cancels out weekend. And so it was really time savings, and time is money, and here's how much we saved you, here's how much we were able to do. That's an easy one. You guys got any more difficult ones?
The one that comes to mind is just the ingestion of data, right? So managing multiple data sources into a centralized data platform. Before, we would have to write a ton of different ETL code to actually track or understand what is being loaded, whereas now AI is helping find errors, simplifying data quality checks, things that really required a ton of time from the engineers to actually implement, where now things are running on its own. We have metrics to understand everything coming in, what is being broken from the source into our data sources. So there's just a lot of just data transformation metrics that AI has really been helping with. And that just allows everything else to funnel up, right? Because AI is based on that data. So if we can actually make sure our data is high quality, everything else just works as it is.
It was actually my very first KC AI club was at SelectQuote, like where I met you, Chris. And they actually had an article, I think back in October 2023, of how they're using AI to decrease their operational costs and improve their revenue. When you call into SelectQuote, you used to have to, wait on hold, and people don't like to wait for things, like we have TikTok brain, like we just want things, like instantly. So they implemented an NLP like IVR where it says, oh, you can, what are you calling about? You kind of talk through, and then it'll transcribe everything to the agent when you actually do get connected, so they don't have to ask you again, oh, why are you calling? It's like when you go to like the hospital, you have to fill out the same form like 5 times. So they're able to decrease the amount of time that people are on hold. They're able to give their representatives more information, which then lets them spend less time with the client, so they can then see more clients. I think they saw like $1 million.
1.1 million.
Yeah, okay, good. I'm good. My memory is fallible, but it was pretty close. Like within like a month, it was like nuts. Like the project like nearly paid for itself because they had like customer satisfaction was up. The agents were happier because they had all the information they needed. Like if you're talking about imagining what success looks like when you get a project started, like you can't get more objective than the top and the bottom line.
Yeah, from an e-commerce perspective, customer lifetime value is huge. Market basket, total market basket is huge. The kinds of things, right? If you're optimizing your mobile platform, you're optimizing your web page, you're using AI, what are the things you use to measure customer success? Time, though, is, the guys have said, it's the #1 thing that generative AI and a lot of these, even old school machine learning, data science tools will optimize for you. Time. And even if you say, well, we're going to make sure that our decisions are better. Well, what does a better decision do for you? It saves time. Like, that's the thing. Time all the time.
Very intentional of what you're tracking, right? Instead of vague KPIs, like what are we tracking? What are the metrics to do that? What are the implications? What are the actions from that? Let's shift gear a little bit and talk about data, right? Because we can't talk about analytics without talking about data. In my experience, clients want to implement AI platforms or programs, but they're not ready yet, right? Their data isn't structured correctly, it hasn't been reviewed, et cetera, et cetera. So can you guys share your thoughts on how to get either your company data or your client's company data ready to be plugged into AI? And who owns that? What is the process to do it? In other words, tell us about the intersection of data and AI and kind of tips to get your data correct.
I'll start with this one since I kind of just answered this a little bit, right? So you have to start simple again, right? Understand what questions you're trying to answer. Understanding that business problem or trying to equate to a business value is going to help make sure you have the data to solve for that. You may either not have all the data, or the data that you have is mostly like a mess and you need to get that to a state where it's structured and efficient. So there's many tools out there to help establish that, but making sure that your data has all the elements to align to the formulas and help answer those questions. You can do this in many ways. There are ways to understand your data quality up front. So starting with a baseline where your data is today, and then creating a plan to say, I need X, Y data to also answer this question. How do I get it? Creating a plan to get there. Or, hey, my data has duplications in it. There's data that's not needed, so you have to go through a cleansing process and other things. But either way, having a strategy to always align to that goal is your starting point.
Yeah, great point. I was going to say, you also want to evaluate, do I have enough volume to actually run these models? And we ran into that with machine learning, we run into that a lot, within marketing, advertising, et cetera. Do we have enough volume in this case study for actually a model to work? Yeah, and that can be quite the challenge itself from a data perspective. As we were saying, data profiling is huge. That's the first step in what we do: collect the data and make sure that people trust the data that's being collected. Nope. So being able to profile that data and use systems like Atlas, et cetera, in order to do that, very, very, very important.
Data, it reminds me of like medieval fiefdoms. I don't know if you all have experienced this in like the companies that you work for, but it's like everyone has like their own silo. Everyone is like, this is like my territory. Like you can't get to my data. And at least in healthcare, which is where I spend a lot of my time, like there are actually some legitimate reasons for that. You might not be able to share it because there are legal implications of sharing it with even in the hospital system. There might be pediatric data in there, and that has to be treated differently than adults. Or if you have substance abuse or mental health, that falls under SAMHSA. Like there are actual like legitimate reasons to say that like, no, like you can't include this data. So understanding, kind of like what Chad talked about, like starting small, like understanding your use case, but also understanding like the limitations of it, and even just making sure that like it is even feasible to include this data. If you're talking about like GDPR and the right to forget, and there's just a lot of implications that are involved if you're going to be doing this. And AI systems, especially LLMs, they don't unlearn things either. They just constantly improve data. So if you're going to have someone request their data get removed, like, well, like, how are you going to do that? How are you going to make it unlearn? There's so much that you have to think about before you do it. Otherwise, you're going to find out about it later. And it's 9 times out of 10, it's cheaper to think a little bit about it beforehand than to experience the pain afterwards.
Yeah, and some idiosyncratic things. Old data is sometimes a problem. And old data is a problem when you're talking about documents. I talked about this one with folks in the audience before the session. Or if you're training an LLM on your own internal documents to answer help desk questions or whatever, you want to make sure that the documents are actually relevant and not outdated. The same applies though for numerical models, right? Predictive models through traditional machine learning type AI. If that data is biased because practices in the past were bad, your models are biased. So going back to some things that you might have heard already about communication and bringing lots of people to the table, the same goes for your data. All compliance needs to be part of the conversation. Maybe you've got somebody who understands some of the ethical issues your company faced in the past with respect to bias in your data and your practices. Bring them to the table. These conversations and these plans and these breakdowns require more than just technical people in a room. Technical people in a room are going to not be optimal.
Well, Lyndsay, since you've talked about ethics, that's one of the things that we talk about at the AI Club, right? And in sidebar conversation as well as in panels. We have issues like ethics and transparency and anti-bias. How do you create guidelines within your organization? How do you make sure that you're looking at things from an ethical perspective, or at least you're thinking about potential ethical pitfalls or where we may not be transparent, or maybe that there's some inherent biases with our data? In other words, how can we use AI responsibly?
I'll just start from an academic perspective. GCP, Azure, AWS, a lot of other organizations have responsible ethical AI rules, right? You can go out, you can search them, you can find them. They're great. Many of them are aspirational for actually achieving them. You need a ethicist on your internal committee. Good luck finding an ethicist, right? But they're good starting points. And I do think that, and even if we're not talking about generative AI, we're talking about the old school AI stuff that we're talking about. If you're using this stuff, especially customer facing, you should be thinking about this stuff, because the data science by its very nature is using observational data. Observational data has not been created to be a perfect representative sample of the population. If what you're doing needs to be applied to a representative sample of the population, your observational data is not going to do it by default. You've got to do some heavy-duty statistical stuff to it.
I love old school AI. Have to borrow that term.
Well, I work in the advertising industry, so ethics doesn't really apply so much. But like what you said about GDPR, CCP, with the do not disturb list, all of that, we have all that data. We have all of that data. Is it marked appropriately to say, okay, this can be uploaded, this cannot be uploaded in these particular models? And that's where I'm still kind of like a naysayer from a true analysis standpoint of this data. Even if it were great, was I able or was I supposed to be doing that?
Jed, I'm wondering if there's a CYA aspect to this, and that you want to kind of be cautious as you're kind of going down the AI path. Do you feel any of that? If you have a new AI program and we kind of have expectations, but we don't know what's going to happen, or how do you think through, especially when you're dealing with customer data, the ethical implications?
You threw me a curveball there. I was ready for the other answer, but literally, with customer data, it comes down to governance, right? I think they've already talked on the center of excellence, right? Having a team to focus on that, the right people at the table, is very important. But I think having like a security guard, a referee, those, in speaking in regular terms, where those people are constantly helping provide policies and standards and implementing that across the board, right? So applying that at the data level is key, and then allowing anything that's being implemented across the board also is following that. So that's from top down, right? So from the front end to the back to the database, they should always be mindful of really monitoring and tracking those privacies and security measures.
Jeff, did you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, because it's all related. Do you guys remember when the IAB was formed? I mean, to me, everything you're saying is it feels like each entity is creating their own governance and their own rules. And, if somebody were to leave and go to a different organization, you're talking about it could be completely different. And so I love when, all of the big companies got together and set some standards, because we went from making 160 different, types of display ads down to like 5. And it made things so much nicer. It reminded me of buying newspapers. But why don't we have an IAB like?
Or remember how long that took?
It took a long
It took a long time.
But I feel like we're there. I feel like we keep talking about this.
I could speak to that a little. You have people in Kansas City like Michelle Frost,
Yeah.
and Lyndsay Jarrett and others who are actually leading this conversation internationally. And so we are seeing more thought leadership in that area. And what I'm hoping that comes together is it's a public-private partnership. It's a roundtable conversation with university, with the business community, with government and others to say, what are the ground rules? I think, Zach, you've talked about in the past that the EU is probably about 10 years ahead of us, right, in creating rules. How quickly is it going to take us to catch up? And the alternative is, if you remember Facebook when they hauled Zuckerberg up on Capitol Hill, and one of the senators or something said, well, do you need to be on the internet to use Facebook? right? They didn't understand the internet. And AI is orders of magnitude worse, and for me, it's a huge, huge issue that we need to solve fairly quickly, or else we may get bitten. Yes, sir?
Yeah, so I'm still fairly new when it comes to the whole AI engineering thing, learning to obfuscate like the information before it goes into the model. But after researching enough, and tell me if I'm wrong, that there's no active defensive technologies existing in our plane for AI. So other than hammering it to death that this is the way. So is there anything coming through the pipeline or something you all have in mind that can help defend against these, against traditional technologies like snapshot, firewalls and stuff like that?
Yeah, there is tooling that exists. Hidden Layer is one of the ones that comes to mind. Actually, you were talking about standards for AI. The NIST, the National Institute of Science and Technology, they have a ton of different just recommendations on how to set up your own secure software development practice. They actually came out with one last year, maybe it was 2 years ago, on secure development for generative AI systems. And as part of that, they actually have a series of tools that they recommend people use for scanning your inputs, being able to prevent against malicious instructions, like how to make, if you ask a GPT how to make a bomb, like it shouldn't respond with something, like ideally. And Hidden Layer is the one that was on there, and I actually got to know their CTO pretty well. But like that's one of the hardest parts of it too, is just it's so easy to get something inside of the data that then poisons it. And there's actually tools out there, Nightshade and Glaze, where you can put images out on the internet and they will put hidden images inside of there so that if they ever get trained by an AI, it actually like poisons the AI and you actually can't use the model, which stinks because, like I said before, like AI, it's like all these models are like, they always add on to each other. And once you get to a point where something like that just poisons the well, everything goes to pot. But kind of like Chris said, for the EU, they are ahead of us in terms of regulations. I think it's really interesting. I was talking to someone about this recently about, just the differences in terms of, where AI would have been in the US had Biden won versus, Trump. There are people that are around Trump that are very pro-AI, like Mark Andreessen is like very, very in favor of, deregulating AI, having as little things that are required as possible. And then you have other people around him like Elon, he's very against like AGI. Like that is one of the things that keeps him up at night while he's, laying in the bed of his billions and billions of dollars. So as best I can tell, ethics and just sort of trying to check ourselves as we go along, that's probably where we're gonna be. I don't think there's gonna be a ton of AI regulations coming out in the next few years, but definitely keep a lookout from NIST. They have a ton of good recommendations on how to set up and standardize the way that you're developing these AI systems. That's IBM and Deloitte, like they all have things that are kind of like that, but NIST I would say is the one that's, they don't have any financial conflicts of interests with their recommendations.
Is that an NGO or is that
No, it's part of, I don't know who NIST, which agency they're under. Might be Department of Commerce.
Scott?
Hi, going back to privacy real quick, I was thinking as you were talking, there's a lot of HR, talent acquisition teams that are taking a resume and upload it into chat, and then they upload the job description and say, is this a good fit, why or why not? And so now that info, it's different than an applicant tracking system because that's usually housed in your computer somewhere. It's not like Fidelio where it's going there. What are the ethics on that? Because, that's becoming a big thing, is you gotta watch for the bias, and that's why or why not. But what's the implication for privacy with everybody's resume getting up in AI?
Well, I was just going to add to that. There was an article on LinkedIn that came out, and there was an AI company that refuses to use AI for anything related to HR. Yep. So, I think that's an interesting question. You guys have any?
I got a good one.
Yeah, all right, Zach.
So I was chairing a panel at the World Trade Center in Kansas, Kansas City Union Station, and one of the people there, she was a lawyer, and she actually talked about Workday, which if you've ever applied for a job, like you probably use Workday in some way, shape, or form. There was a lawsuit where they were discriminating against women. Like they could prove that like based on how many people applied, based on their qualifications, that like the AI system that was screening the applicants was simply biased against women for this position. And they weren't suing the company that was using Workday. They were suing Workday themselves because they have a legal responsibility as a provider of AI systems to ensure that their systems are not biased, which if you're a company that is thinking about making your own AI systems, and do you really understand all of the legal implications that you're getting into, where you may not have even done intentionally biased, but if it is inadvertently biased against a group of people, then you might find yourself in front of Judge Judy, faster than you think.
I think this goes back and circle back with all the questions, right? This goes back to the trust factor where the executives are not trusting it, right? Because of these biases that happen in other aspects. AI is not a tool, it's a process. There is so many different complexities to the AI world where, again, it's very challenging to narrow down certain areas of standards and policies where the components of it have those standards, right? So like the data that where the private, like the data where it resides, they have standards and things that every company has to follow. How they protect your data, what type of data is in lower environments. So like your social security number is not in a bunch of test environments, right? So there are already very much standards in certain areas that should be helping or supporting a lot of these different areas that I think you guys were all concerned about, right? Ingesting data into these data lakes or data stores that, what the concern is, there's not really anything. Like you can literally load data into any type of data store and take action from that. But until you can prove your AI is working, right, where you're not allowing it to make decisions, like it should not happen in a black box, there should be human oversight on everything that comes out of that. You should have checks and balances to that. Don't allow it to just go off and just make decisions like on these certain HR examples, because it will lead into those legality issues. So again, human oversight, proper governance, again, that referee and security person needs to be involved in all aspects of what AI is actually really generating.
And then for the business use, the average business person using publicly available tools or even company-provided tools for HR purposes, I use it, don't tell my students in the back of the room, to write my slides for class. Right? I can do this because I can test it with my own expertise. But every single person who is in a business environment, we all get trained on phishing, we all get trained on social engineering, we all get trained on cybersecurity stuff. We all need to be trained on how to use OpenAI type tools. It needs to be part of the security training for the company so that the person in HR says, ooh, when I scan this resume into ChatGPT, I'm putting that out on the internet for anybody to see. I don't think that people, as much as we, maybe you guys talk about this stuff, I don't think the general person knows that that's what they're doing. Just like the general person didn't know what a phishing scam was until we all had to get the training for 150 years. So I think we will see, I expect we will see IT organizations increasing training. I hope we'll see. I mean, if we don't, what a mess we're in, right?
That's one of the areas of focus for the AI Club is that we're trying to curate trainers and, best-in-class people because, how do you know? Did you have a question, sir?
Yeah, for Lyndsay. So I have kids in middle school, kids in high school. I feel like my kids' school is primarily teaching them that AI is bad, don't ever use it. I'm curious how AI is being embraced across all of the classrooms at Rockhurst, not just your classroom.
So funny, I had a conversation about this today. And I think this is true across all universities. There are some professors who see AI as the devil incarnate, right? It's allowing people to cheat. It's encouraging, it's discouraging learning. We actually have, it's an organization called the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning. And we're actually running classes for faculty and staff through the rest of this semester. They started last semester. And we have a couple pedagogical classes, i.e. the science of teaching, about how can we use this in the classroom. I've heard a couple of great things. I've heard also professors who said, I'm just not even assigning homework because they can cheat. You know, there are people who feel like it's a lost cause. And then there are those of us who are going to champion this all the way to the end. I heard a great use case the other day. A professor was saying, they know students are going to use the tool, a tool of some sort, so let's make it part of the assignment. Use a chat tool to do this assignment. Share with me as part of your assignment what your prompt was, what you got back from the prompt, and how you have adjusted that to add your own flavor to it. And that requires then, right, use the tool exactly the way we all should be using the tool, but show me what you did with it.
My son goes to the University of Missouri. He's in graduate school for accounting. This is the first semester where every teacher said you must use AI as part of your homework. However, they have to solve the problem themselves first, and then they contextualize it, because they're worried about creating like confirmation bias with poor prompts. And I can say, anybody under the age of 30 in my organization, they just type shit in, and whatever comes out, they just believe it's true. And because I have 34 years worth of experience, I look at it, I go, this is dog shit. But they don't know that. And they are starting to believe that whatever spits out of it is true. And so I think some of the universities have started to figure out, hey, look, they're going to use it. So let's try to figure out a way to do it productively.
I would add to that, I'm on a couple of the advisory boards for the block school at UMKC, and they are using AI for like research, right? So instead of trying to Google a dossier of research, use AI and then use your critical thinking skills to make sense of that information. And I actually got to be like a Shark Tank type judge. And I would say the way that they employed AI for research was best in class, like at an agency level. So I think we are saying more embrace it, but really to free up time for critical thinking. Yeah. So we'll save questions for a little bit, but there's a couple other things I want to get to. AI can get math wrong. I've witnessed that, like, what the hell? How do you mitigate that? Like, how do you test? Have you had that experience? Do you have a secret to get AI to do math correctly?
I can give longer answers now. I think, can AI do math? Maybe. Why would you want it to do math? You have calculators. We have other systems, and you don't need to use AI to do math. For the same reason AI is not working well for us from a true analysis point of view. I don't know if anyone's ever said, hey, create an image for me that says whatever in the background. That's how well it does math, right? So, but I go back to, why would you ever want to even try that when math is a logical expression? You do it. No, nothing against statistics, but
AI can't do math, right? It always tries to predict what's next, right? So that's why it always has a hard time to do that calculation. But going back to what Tom said, like, use tools to actually understand or to conduct that calculation, right? If you're analyzing data, use Python, R, SQL, use your analytical tools that have the ability to confirm what you're trying to calculate, right? Tableau, Power BI, those are tools that actually will provide precision and accuracy of what you're trying to do. Don't use generative AI to, calculate your finances, because when you generate that again, you're probably going to get a different answer.
It's just shocking to me. Like, what about upskilling? And, one of the things that I'm hearing from hiring managers is they're hiring for curiosity, right? Because we don't really have these skill sets. So what is your advice for people that want to practice AI or integrate AI more into their, everyday career? What skill sets do they need? Is it technical? Is it prompt engineering? Like, what's your take?
It kind of reminds me of when, so I have a 10-year-old daughter she just got her first iPhone, terrible mistake. We were coerced in. But she's learning how to use a lot of these tools for the very first time, so it's really interesting to get to see it through a fresh set of eyes that have, not been jaded or biased by, me being in technology for like 30 years. And so she'll go to Google and she'll open up the Siri button and she'll give it like 7 paragraphs of like a Google search. And I'm like, Charlotte, like that's not how this works. So like starting from like the bare minimum, a lot of the learning in these tools really is experimentation. It doesn't do math well, and it doesn't do your finances well, but if you ask it, can you explain to me what this formula is? It does a pretty good job of that. And then you're like, well, what does this particular term mean? Can you give me like some examples of it? A lot of that I just honestly found out by like screwing up, making mistakes, and then iterating upon it. So if that's, kind of where you want to go to, I would say just integrate it in your normal life. Give it, in terms of, if you're giving it things that you know very well and you have some experience in, that's actually great because you know what the correct answer is. If you've been doing your job for 34 years and you give it a question, you know what the right answer is, which then helps you figure out how you communicate with it better. Do you need to go into learning how to create your own LLM? Do you need to go into learning how to train your own regression models? Like, probably not. It's still a pretty niche skill. But if you did want to have some fun, agents and agentic AI, I think is going to be the next sort of flavor that we're going to go through, where you can just have an agent that interacts with your finance system, have an agent that interacts with your inventory system, and just give them a problem, and they communicate and collaborate among themselves. Like at the KCAA Club demo day, Missoula Credit Union a couple months ago, like Herc showed that off. It was really cool, where there's these AI systems that are autonomous and they collaborate with each other to come up with a solution. Like, that's pretty legit if you really wanted something fun to play with.
Leary Hercules is that gentleman, Heft IQ. Go follow him on LinkedIn. He's always putting out use cases and knowledge. He's on fire.
Chris, what was his name?
Leary Hercules, aka Herc.
You can actually see his his presentation on the AI Club
Yeah, on
website
Kansas City
too.
AI Club, you can actually see his demo.
Oh, okay.
So any other skills that come to mind, Chad?
Go ahead.
So I'll keep it short. I think we touched base on a lot of it, right? So just learning AI literacy is key, right? What machine learning is, what prompt engineering is, automation, and then starting to dig into those tools. I've named a handful of those tools from the analytical space, like Power BI, Alteryx, Tableau, and then digging into the Gen AI productivity tools. But one of the educational things I came across was learnprompting.org. I don't know if you've heard of that. That one, for those that are getting started, there's a lot of free content out there. If you want to go into the next phase, I think it's like $20 a month, but it has a ton of content from basic to expert. If you want to get better at prompt engineering, which I think once you establish prompt engineering, all the questions that you're needing answered will get you back to that next step.
Yeah, I'm going to third pile on. Prompt engineering. If you do not feel like your prompt engineering is as good as it ought to be, get better at it. The tools are not going away. Learn how to use them. Big things like learn how to ask unbiased questions, right? Not asking leading questions, and providing context. We've heard about context. And the ability to input in that prompt as much information as you know, so that the tool can then build on what you know, as opposed to telling you things you already know.
All right, so we're kind of on the home stretch here. We're just going to open up. The floor is yours. So you can talk about whatever you want. Do you want to put your futurist hat on? Where do you see AI in a couple of years? Is there particular use cases that are emerging, like AI agents that you're starting to play around with? Give us some insights and philosophical takes.
That's what I'm good at.
I know.
And pop culture references, that's my other proclivity.
Superpower.
As someone who's been developing software for, a majority of my, honestly, life, there's a little bit of apprehension in terms of like, is this going to replace me? Is this going to make my job completely obsolete? And there's no better catalyst for innovation than, you know, the threat of extinction, to where I have started to embrace these tools, and I've honestly found myself to be more productive. You know, when you get down to it, I bill hourly, and if I can increase my productivity by like 7, 8, 9, 10%, that means that I can produce more. I mean, anyone who's been in software for any length of time knows that the only thing that is common between every project is it always takes longer than you estimate. That is the only thing that is true. And one of our clients, it's very forward-thinking, they've let us use AI code generation, and we have people that have been programming for 20 years, you know, we don't need a ton of help. But if it makes us that much more productive, I think we've had 4 sprints in a row where we've hit 100% completion in terms of stories. Like it never happens on any project I've ever been on. So I am very optimistic in terms of how a lot of these tools are. I'm glad that it has become much more mainstream, and it's you know, no longer haram to talk about AI. And AI agents, I think, are probably going to be the next thing that we're going to be talking about next year. I think LLMs are, you know, they've had their moment. I think agents are going to be the thing that comes out. So if you did want to do any homework tonight, I would go home and look at LangChain. I think that's going to be one of the coolest things that comes out. Becomes much more mainstream this year.
LangChain?
LangChain, yeah. It's probably the most popular.
Yeah, I think I'm just gonna have key takeaways and probably just summarize what we kind of talked about, right? So again, AI is not a magic tool. It can't fix bad strategies. It's not gonna fix bad processes. It's not gonna fix bad data, right? If AI was a chef and you gave it rotten ingredients, you're just gonna get a terrible meal faster, right? So always start with the basics, right? I think we've kind of reiterated that multiple times, keep things simple, but the playbook is clean your data, start small and add business value, automate and scale, right? Everything else starts to become a science experiment, right? But experimenting is not bad because you can still learn from it. So continuing to use AI to learn and level up, because that upskilling is only going to give you the next advantage, because those that are not using AI to increase your knowledge base or understand how things work will always be left behind. So continue to dive in and learn as much as you can.
Yeah, as someone that was a naysayer for probably way too long, so I'm a little bit, behind. Get going. But I'm really excited about where this is headed from the AI agents perspective as well. What we have now is phenomenal. I think we've talked about several of its flaws, but there's a lot of pros as well. One of the biggest I've seen in my day-to-day life, my work life, is productivity, and it's saving of time. And when you start to plug all of these different, applications we use every day, so hey, how about a meal plan for 5 days for a 49-year-old, male, etc. Great. Now order that from me on Fresh Direct. Now great. Pick it up for me on Uber Rides. And that's your pumped. That's going to get really, really exciting, and it's going to get very scary at the same token. So, as much as I like to look forward, we've got to protect ourselves now. We're dealing with something that's very precious, and we've seen it go wrong, which is data. And so, I think I'm going to stay a little bit of a bullish naysayer for a little bit longer. But yeah, automation, save us time. We need it.
Cautious optimism.
So I feel like I've been giving the same message for 15 years. Before it was generative AI, it was machine learning. Before that, it was data science. The ability to use data to make your business more efficient, there are many, 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 many ways to do that. There is data visualization and business intelligence. There is research and data science and data mining. There is predictive modeling and automation and machine learning. And now there's Gen AI. If you don't have a strategy for how these things are going to make your business better, then you're just going to be running in circles. If you don't have a strategy for how to deal with your data, you're just going to be running in circles. And if you don't have good people to deliver on the strategy, you're not even going to be able to run in circles. So if you have been thinking about any of this stuff, or you have been seeing this stuff for any period of time, nothing has really changed. Ethics, data, strategy. Same words, 15 years. That's
You gotta have the fundamentals, right? You know, somebody in AI agents, Allie K. Miller, A-L-L-I-E K. Miller, she's the #1 LinkedIn AI woman in the world. She is a complete badass. If you want to learn about agents, start following her. She's probably producing several posts a day, which are very informative. So, another question?
The panel thing's great, by the way. I got back from a conference out in Arizona a few weeks ago, and it was filled with people from big companies, judges, lawyers, everything like that, and the committee to talk about AI issues. And I think what we see here tonight, and what you just listed off there, shows the spectrum of what everybody can be calling AI, right? And you're right, the ethics are the same, that's all the same. But the words we use are starting to overlap, and the domains that we're using are starting to cross over a lot. And one of the patterns that I noticed at that conference was a lot of us failed to kind of level set, because we all showed up, we knew we were going to talk about AI, but everyone showed up with their own kernel of what AI means to them. And I'm wondering how, when you're talking to business people and their students, how do you define those different lanes? Because those different lanes also come with different levels of concern, let's say. So another overlapping term, bias or harm, right? I mean, bias, right? When we talk about it in an algorithm that's making a decision, that's one thing. We've got major concerns, but it may be able to be mitigated in other ways, in other spaces. How do you guys, when you're talking to business people, divide these things up and then help them understand, I think even from a data science perspective, the difference between bias in numbers and bias in everyday society?
I'll start with the easy part of that question. AI. If I say AI, I mean all of it. If I say Gen AI, I mean Gen AI. And that, for me, is very important because this thing, this wave that's come across the world in the last 2 years is Gen AI. Nobody's talking about random forests. Nobody's talking about neural networks. Nobody's talking about all the cool stuff that we were doing for the last 15 freaking years. But we are. We're still doing it. It's still AI. It's still predictive. It's still valuable. And it has the exact same, all of the things that we had to think about to do that stuff, same stuff we've got to think about for Gen AI too. The data's a little bit different because now it's words instead of numbers. So I just be very clear, right? Gen AI is this ChatGPT, da-da-da-da-da, and then AI is all of it. The rest of it, bias and harm, and I'm going to let somebody else take that one.
I just think that's everything in the technology spectrum, right? I mean, AI is starting to touch on so many things. So if you look at anything that can harm you in the technology space, is going to be tied to AI as well, right? So I think it's just a very complex structure. I think you hit it on the head. There's differences in the AI and Gen AI space. It's just where do you want to, focus those standards and policies, and how do you protect yourselves from that? Just requires that vertical of where you need to be, right? But it's definitely a very challenging space.
Lyndsay scored me earlier because I was like, I think there's a big difference between machine learning and AI. And challenging, there's not. Now, there is a big difference between Gen AI, right? But we got to machine learning because we learned data science. And it's just kind of went up to that point. I think what you said is extremely, extremely interesting. The same exact topics that we were talked about when the IAB was formed, the same exact topics that we're dealing with now, just a different data set. And another cool name.
All right, we got time for maybe one more question. Yes, sir.
So I always hear the discussion about clean data, right? Because garbage in, garbage out. How do we go back? But it's always a conversation of the data we're putting in now going forward. We have a lot of bad data from the past, right? Which has a lot of those inherent biases, things that particularly in like the legal field or the medical field, right? Just have false assumptions or just crazy cases or laws that are still on the books that make no sense to us today, right? Probably didn't make sense back then either. But how do we go about cleaning that data from the past, right, in order to start fresh, or like how is that discussion being had?
I think that's why you see a lot more people hiring, like, Zach, and putting it in-house. Because you're never going to have that solution going with anything public. And that's I think the main reason to bring this in-house, if you can, is so you have that kind of governance. You have those kinds of controls. You have those kinds of filters. Again, like I would say, a lot of the data that marketers have is dirty, 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 and just now getting clean. So why would I ever even want to try to run a model off of that? Now I've got to clean it, put it into its own, system, and then run it back through. It's a big, big pain. But it's an absolute necessary. I think it's consistently necessary. And I think that's really where it comes into data governance. Data governance hasn't been talked about too terribly much here, but it's absolutely crucial in that clean data step. Because undefined data is also dirty data, right? We forget about that sometimes. If something's understood, then you better understand that because it's probably going to be used in some sort of model or some sort of decision making. So, good question.
In every field, if you ask its practitioners, they'll probably be able to give you some insights in terms of like what are the actual hardest parts of it. Like as a software developer, like horizontally centering a div on a screen, like that is one of like, the hardest things that like I have to do every single day. And like from the outside, you would never know that. And when you're talking about like a project where you're training like some sort of like model or you want to do something meaningful with data, like if you ask someone that's been doing it for a while, they're going to tell you like there is no substitute for elbow grease. Like that is one of the most underappreciated aspects of when you plan out a project. It is generative AI can help. It can help guide you. It can help give you some recommendations. It takes time, and there's to do it right, and there's just no substitute sometimes for just how much time that could possibly take.
Awesome. Well, what a wonderful discussion. Please join me in giving our